strategies within the time of just a weekend. So with the first game getting ready to go, this is our grand finals of our global finals. This is the peak of our season 1. Spam those geckos to cheer on Echo, flex for Perplexed, or spam a good old live if you want both teams to have a good time. Let's get into it. Necrotic Wake starts now.
All right, so the first pull is already going to be incredibly important for both of those teams as they're pulling this whole area on top of Blightbone. You can see all of the offensive cooldowns already being popped and the Bloodlust being used as well. If they pull this off perfectly, that's already... there we go, the Pride already being spawned for both of those teams. Echo seems to be dealing with the trash slightly quicker, but when you look at the boss HP, both of them are very even.
I've been looking back and forth between the boss HP percentages, just left and right. It's been within 1% for the entire pull. Trash dying at the exact same time. These teams are neck and neck with each other. We knew this is what it's going to be. It's going to be a fantastic series. And right here, right now, you can see just how evenly matched they are. But man, looking at the times, it's going to be daunting. We know Echo has a theoretical high of about a minute faster than what we saw from Perplexed early in the tournament. And if they're able to play to that point, we're going to have to see something new from Perplexed. But the problem is Perplexed hasn't been able to practice. Echo's been sitting in the sidelines watching the lower bracket matches recently. They've been practicing. They've been taking it easy. Whereas Perplexed has been in the trenches. They've been playing. They haven't had time to practice. So I feel like there's just a massive advantage here for Echo. And you know what? They were even before, but now that gap is opening up. 10% advantage on Blightbone for Echo already.
Yeah, so huge single target lead here on Blightbone as they did manage to finish off the Pride a little bit quicker and then managed to pull the boss into that next trash bag quicker as well. Both of them, of course, making use of that Goliath here with the Kyrie and Covenant to be able to get that extra AoE pulls and AoE heal as well to survive that Pride and also help with the trash. Perplexed now downing the boss, but quite a bit later here compared to Echo. Echo really having this first boss pull done really cleanly as they're now moving on to the next area. Perplexed also activating that second Goliath here, and I do believe they have a little bit of a different strategy now between those two teams in this area here.
I don't actually remember what it is that they do. I think Echo doesn't go for the extra trash here. They end up just doing a massive pull after they deal with this Necromancer here. You know what? It's just completely escaping me. I feel like Perplexed might do the same thing, just opt to pull no trash. Yes, both teams are going for the exact same strategy here, skipping all the trash, skipping Nardzua, which is not what we saw from, I believe, just so early in the tournament. They opted to pull a lot of that trash, and that actually was a little bit faster in the Amarth kill. So, you know, I feel like it's not too crazy to feel like either team would be able to pick up a new strategy and play it, you know, within the 2 days that we have in the tournament here. But still, I mean, when you see the times that both of these teams are putting out, it makes sense why they wouldn't want to try to opt to go for a new strat.
Yeah, one thing to notice as well that I just noticed is that, I mean, Wolfdisco did proc his Cauterize and also had to use his Ice Block on the first pull because of the frontal that he got targeted by from the boss from Blightbone. But one thing to note was that Fragnance popped his AMC for that Pride on the first boss, while Ashine held on to his AMC. And I wanted to talk about it and say, oh, they have an advantage because they have this defensive for later on. But now Fragnance's AMC is already back up, so they actually just got one extra usage in. Of course, it's a defensive cooldown, which is not as valuable for dungeon speed as an offensive cooldown, but it's still better to save, you know, some healer mana and to make sure that Zele can DPS a little bit more. As both of them, actually Echo triggering that boss and also triggering the Pride at the same time. You can see Maris is not here. He's up at the boss platform. You can see him casting the Void Torrent downwards. He's going to be gripping up the team on that passenger mount after they're done with this Pride. Divine and Rising going down though.
Oh no, that's the worst case scenario because the trash is loose now. Even with the Battle Res going out, it's going to be tough to get aggro on him, and you can see the spikes are going to be going out from the Monstrosity. It's now chasing the rest of the group. He might just barely be able to get aggro, but with everything in that raging radius, with no healer alive, it's going to be tough for them to get through it. Swag was able to Shadow Meld and get the res on the healer, so they'll be able to barely get through this trash pull, but the damage is done now. 2 deaths on the board. The trash pass takes a lot longer for them to kill, and in the meantime, Echo have finished off the Pride. They're onto a Marth, and they're going to be blasting this boss down. You can see the Ashen Hollow and the wings is popped for Zalia. He's doing 20k DPS. They're not even opting to use any weapons here. Echo has now secured a massive lead in this dungeon, probably at least a minute.
Yeah, so there's, I believe what went wrong here was that they didn't manage to get their weapon off perfectly, their spear. So the cast went through, the mobs didn't instantly die, and that's what killed 2 players here, unfortunately. So yeah, just one mistake with the weapon when you do those huge pulls in Necrotic Wake, and it's gonna cost you to lose so much time, unfortunately. Thankfully, they did manage to recover. Wolf Disco going down too, though. They're really struggling with this Pride because they don't have the anima exhaust anymore. Rising going down too. This might be a full team wipe to this Pride because they don't have that the weapons and the buffs that they're used to having for this Pride. None of that anima exhaust, none of the Ashen available. Yeah, this is a full team wipe for Perplexed. Not able to finish off this Pride. They're completely out of resources at this point, trying to recover that pull. So yeah, all eyes on Echo at this point, as they're already done with Amarth. They're going to be going up to the Necropolis area, which is still a lot of really dangerous pulls left for them to do that could cause an equal time loss if not executed properly.
Yeah, this is that thing that we keep covering over and over again as casters. It gets overlooked with how clean these teams make it look so often, is that they have cooldowns allocated for a pull, and once those cooldowns run out, they're on a very limited clock, and that's what happened to Perplexed there. 2 players died. It ran out of control. They lost their orbs, and they couldn't finish off the Pride, but we have to keep an eye on Echo here as they are now going for a massive pull of their own. The entire Necropolis, minus, I believe, 1 Flashcrafter in the corner, has been CC'd. And just, again, flawless execution. Massive AoE coming out, weapons going out, everything dying at the exact same time. And all they have left is that 1 Fleshcrafter CC'd in the corner, which is now breaking out. And they can use those throw flesh casts to break down the Pride easily. I mean, man, Echo is just so clean and refined. What more can you say about these guys? It's just perfect play from them.
Yeah, a little bit of a caster jinx here as Salia and Fragrance were dodging the quaking and walked into Maris's orbs from the Pride, so both Fragrance and Salia getting stunned. Thankfully, nothing happened though. They did manage to stay alive. Had to use that lay on hands though on Fragrance to be able to keep him alive. Now the Flashcrafter is being used to help them out with those double assistants. This is a pretty crucial moment. We've seen lots of things actually go wrong here already. You can see Gingy drop incredibly low just because you have 3 cleavers going out at the same time. So it's very difficult actually to be able to navigate all of those cleavers into the correct targets. And then on top of that, if you get a double fixate from the cleavers or maybe even a triple fixate, then it's really difficult to be able to also soak them properly to make sure that none of the fixated people die.
Man, just really unfortunate to see this from Perplexed. They had to wait for, I think, the Invis Paw from Divine Field there for him to actually get up to Amarth because they used it earlier on. They are still in the dungeon. I mean, there is still problems that can go on here, right? If they have really bad snap for the Fleshcrafter, the last boss could take a lot longer than usual, but they're just so ridiculously far behind. I feel like it's going to have to be a full team wipe from Echo for Perplexed to get back into this dungeon, and this is exactly what we're talking about. These first 3 maps, these are Echo's wheelhouse. I mean, really all 8 maps are, but these 3 in particular are ones that they've performed on this weekend in a way that made us think that no other team could compete with them, and they're showing us that here right now.
Yeah, this end of the dungeon is what makes Echo so good in Necrotic Wake, and it's what makes them clear this dungeon so fast. If you take a look at how perfectly they're handling this Flashcrafter here, they made sure they got it into raging range while they were fighting the 2 assistants, and then it got sheeped by Gingy. You can see it's being imprisoned and sheeped, healed to full HP. It retains that raging effect once it was below 30% one time, and now it's being gripped by Fragments. It's being put into position perfectly, and as soon as the Rot Spew is in position, they will make sure that the cleaver goes out. And I've seen on the previous pack, they perfectly managed to get the cleaver into the high HP target as soon as it was possible by now to position the lower HP mobs perfectly. You can see the grips being used, the sigils being used to perfectly position the Rot Spew between the Harvester and the player that is fixated. And this is really what's saving them so much time here, having those cleavers go into the high HP targets and also on the bosses later. You're going to have to see how they deal with this perfectly.
I mean, you can see how much damage that cleaver did. Rot Spew is chilling at a nice, balmy 35-40% HP. 1 cleaver, dead. No big deal for them. Just finish it off easily. And look at the time right now. 9:38 on the clock. The Bloodlust isn't even back up yet, even if they wanted to use it on this boss, which they probably won't. And there are just 2 bosses left, and they have the Fleshcrafter, which, mind you, remember, does somewhere between 12 and 20% of the boss's HP, depending on which boss you're on. I think on Stitch Flesh it does somewhere around 50 to 20% of the boss's HP, so let's keep an eye on that when that first Fleshcrafter cleaver goes in here. There's the meat hook. It's going to bring Stitch Flesh down. Cooldowns are about to get popped. The PI and the Combust are out on Genji. They haven't broken up that Fleshcrafter yet. There it goes right now. Hammer being thrown out there by Zalia to make sure it gets broken out. There's the cleaver onto Stitch Flesh. Boom, 15% of his HP gone. And, I mean, that's probably going to be all she wrote here for the boss. I mean, it might get a leave off, but they'll just be able to re-hook it down right away with the creation. This boss is just getting destroyed.
Yeah, they're getting one more cleaver off before the boss jumps. Here it looks like... Okay, it looks like they didn't want to get it off immediately. There we go, the last cleaver being thrown, but that one is actually too late. That's why Maris is using the fear here, because they know the boss is jumping back up onto the platform. So nice little fear, making sure that the cleaver is not going through. And now it might actually be a little bit difficult for them to finish this off, because there's so many creations up, and it's really hard for them to even hit the cleavers onto the correct target, but they managed to do so. There's like 3 targets, so it was hard for them to manage to get it onto the correct one, but they did manage. As they're now moving up to the last boss, they're 11 minutes into the dungeon. Their fastest time is 12 minutes and 10. So if they somehow manage to get the cleaver up, immediately they also have the Bloodlust and the Ashen Hollow being popped by Zalia as well. They have a huge amount of damage here. If they might be able to beat their own time if they get that Fleshcrafter up fast. There we go, the Fleshcrafter is here. It's going to be helping them out with those cleavers. Let's see how much damage they can pull off on this boss.
No problems for Echo, rather, as Perplexed has another death on the board with Ashine going down. Echo really only competing with themselves here, trying to beat their 12-10 mark that we saw earlier today, and with Nathanor, the Rhymebinder, going down below 30%, it looks like it might be possible, and as a matter of fact, it will happen, because that Throw Cleaver is going to go out.
Oh.
Actually, they got Dark Exiled right as the Cleaver went out, so it canceled the cast. But the next Fleshcrafter will be going off in about 10 seconds here, and that will finish off the boss on its own. So they should be beating their own time here and taking this series 1-0.
Yeah, it's really close. Are they going to get that cleaver off? If they don't beat their own time, then it's actually just unlucky.
No way.
Oh,
The exact same time.
Okay. Yeah, it was 12 minutes and 10.
Man.
Echo just continues to impress there. Just one death keeping them from tying their previous best run here that we saw literally just at the very beginning of our weekend. Echo takes that victory, looking very strong here in round 1 of our grand finals there. Gotta give it to them here, Tettles. You know, they have just blown away so many of our expectations throughout this entire season of what is possible for these dungeons.
Yeah, and it's to the point where, like you said, they've blown away our expectations so much. It's to the point where that is what we expect out of their Necrotic Wake, is something where they do the dungeon in like 4 pulls, and they basically have 0
+20 dungeon.
Yeah, on a +20 they do it in 12 minutes, by the way. That is an insanely fast Necrotic Wake, and they just make great use of those Necrotic Wake weapons, and they just make it look easy.
Yeah, they really do. And, you know, it speaks to that confidence. We've been talking about it as in the past here, Nagura. I was having that interview with Jinji just moments before they got started, and he's just like, we know these dungeons, these first 3 for us are super strong, and they are just backing that up with their play right here.
Yeah, that's just... the consistency and the perfect execution they're showing in these dungeons is just admirable. I mean, it's so good. It looks so easy when they pull it off, and then you can see just how hard it is when you see Perplexed having one of those wipes, because they didn't manage to get a weapon lined up perfectly on one of their pulls. And when you have 0 mistakes like you see with Echo, then everything looks so incredibly easy. But none of these pulls are easy. All of this is timed perfectly. Every single cooldown is being assigned perfectly and has to be used in the perfect moment, and otherwise you have these full team wipes and everything looks like a disaster. So yeah, hats off for Echo for having such good execution and being so clean throughout this whole global final so far.
Yeah, no question. I mean, Tettles, Necrotic Wake is usually a dungeon where we can see just some ridiculous variance in terms of death counts as well here, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those dungeons that very quickly spirals out of control. And, like, so on one front, we can see how it looks really good whenever it's performed clean. From Echo here, they're able to get all of their cooldowns off properly. They have the anima exhaust ticking. They have all their weapons that they needed to be using there go well. But from the other side, for Perplexed, they start to have a death here and there, right? Divine procs his cheat, and then he's already lost his last resort. He dies. This is really bad too, because then they're not going to have any of their cooldowns available for the Prideful that's spawning right after. They're not going to have that Anima Exhaust. They've already used all their weapons. They're going to be lacking a lot of resources where they would otherwise have them placed. And so, that just makes that Pride a lot harder to be able to deal with, because Pally not exactly the most flexible healer whenever it comes to healing Prides. It is a 20, but at the same time, if the Paladin has like 0 cooldowns allocated to that Pride, and they expected the Anima Exhaust to come through, then it's not really... I mean, you saw what happened. They ended up wiping to it. It's just like not that great.
You know, Jack and I are both thinking, if he was Gary, he would have been able to heal that Pride.
I was actually thinking, you know, with Tettles saying it, that he was just getting some mad flashbacks to him playing with Holy Paladins, and then that Holy Pally just gives Tettles the job of healing the Prides instead of the healer.
On a 20, oh no.
Yeah. I've seen you heal, what was it, 22, 23 Prides as a Boomkin, you know? I saw you pumping out the huge Swiftmens to save some lives. Plaguefall, gonna be our next dungeon coming up. Fortified, Sanguine, and Grievous as well, Nagura. We've seen quite a bit of Sanguine healing by a couple of different teams, but this dungeon has also just gone ridiculously quick.
Yeah, I'm actually very excited to see what Perplexed has to show us here in this dungeon, because we haven't seen them play this at all. We've only seen Echo play, and their strategy, Echo's strategy, was different to most other team strats. They had a very interesting strategy for the second boss, where they used double Plague Borer explosions. Actually, yeah, so two Plague Borers twice to explode that boss completely within like 30 seconds or something, and they skipped the mini boss. That's something we haven't seen from any other team. But the last time Echo did do this dungeon, they didn't perform properly. They had multiple mistakes, and it caused them to lose a lot of time. And they actually ended up still winning, but it was still not the best time that they have shown. So if there's going to be similar mistakes again by Echo, and Perplex has a similar strategy, then there's a high chance for Perplex to go for a 1-1 here.
Yeah, I mean, and if not, you know, there's also just not going to be getting any easier for them, because then you have myths after that as well, Zyro. So, you know, once you're just one dungeon behind, there's still so much pressure onto Perplex to stay in this.
I mean, it's an uphill battle for Perplexed here. We covered it already, right? Every single one of these maps, it's like you're playing on someone else's home field. It's so tough to play against Echo. We've heard it throughout the years. I mean, the quote that always sticks in my mind is JB saying, no matter how good your strat feels, in the back of your mind, the question is this good enough to beat those guys? And most of the time, it's not. It really isn't. Yeah. So it's just so tough to play against them if they're on their A game.
Yeah, and, you know, there's also that sort of feeling of momentum that, you know, you've certainly experienced in the past, Zyro, from your competition days of, you know, getting those wins, getting those victories, getting out of the lower bracket, and then you go up against a very, very challenging opponent that starts kind of running into a brick wall in a lot of respects.
Yeah, and I mean, it's more about the mental aspect as well of, we got through the lower bracket. We're just kind of happy to be here at this point, right? You haven't been able to practice. You're mentally exhausted. You're probably physically exhausted too after all the games you've played. And I mean, to even see Perplex take one game here, I think would be a feat that everyone should be proud of. I'm not counting them out just yet. I mean, there's still a lot of games yet to be played, but obviously I think Echo is incredibly favored for the rest of the series here.
That's right. Well, we'll see how this matchup rolls as Echo and Perplexed are set to square off here in game number 2. Let's dive into it and see what Perplexed has in store as Plaguefall gets going.
Alright, so it looks like we actually have a very similar strategy here. We do know that Echo is playing this full Night Elf comp. So no Holy Paladin here in this dungeon. We see the Disc Priest, and Perplex actually doing the same thing. So mirror comp, full Night Elves for both of these teams. And both of them also doing a big pull at the start, but Ashine is going down immediately. And that is very bad, because Ashine is a big portion of their AoE damage. They did get the... looks like Ashine did actually release because they didn't use their battle rest here. So yeah, this is actually a big time loss already for them from the get-go.
And I mean, you got to keep an eye on them as well with those Grievous stacks going out. Ryson's going to have issues getting everyone all healed up here, so got to keep an eye on those health bars here. But with most of the trash going down, they're going to be fine. It's just going to be that time on the board for them spent finishing off the trash. Now, funnily enough, it looks like they're actually still managing to do a better job of cleaning up the trash than Echo is. So maybe it's not that big of a deal. Ashen might have gotten most of his damage out in general. But the big difference is going to be how they end up using these Fungomancers here. And if you look at that, yes, the Pride is spawning at roughly the same time for both teams. So it's going to be the 5 seconds of death timers on the board. But one other thing to mention here, Divine Field, because that pull ended up getting dragged out a little bit too much, some mobs didn't die. The last resort is proc. He's not going to have that cheat death available for another 8 minutes.
Yeah, that might actually be a big deal for some of those pulls later on. There's always a huge amount of damage onto the tank, especially when you wait for those plague borers to explode. You have these constant casts going off on you, and then you have all of these spine breakers and all the casts from different casters going through as well. So definitely lots of pressure on the tank, which might be an issue for him later. Echo though having some issue with their Pride as well, as everyone drops incredibly low, and Sally has no mana left basically. They did use that disc bubble to make sure the damage is being reduced a little, and did manage to survive. AMC from Fragments also committed at this point, so they're pretty low on defensive cooldowns at this moment, so they want to make sure they have no mistakes or nothing go wrong, because it might be really hard for them to recover without any of those defensive strategy.
I mean, the thing to keep an eye on here as well is they're all still ticking with Grievous on them as they're pulling this together. It looks like now is going down to, I believe they're getting 2 bombs here. They might not be, however. Some teams do different strategies. Yes, there they are. The 2 Plague Borers are now coming up to the boss. They are one of the only teams that does this. A lot of teams just end up single targeting the boss down without the help of the bombs. It looks like that's what we're seeing from Perplexed on their side. But here it comes. The bombs are going to be coming off here. They have that incredibly charged up mage there doing 20k single target DPS, even out DPSing the Army of the Dead popped DK here. That's pretty impressive on pure single target when you have the cooldowns and the Prideful popped. And now the Plague Borers are going to die, both of them at the same time. All of that damage is going to come out on Globgrog, and even though Perplexed did end up pulling the boss first, this boss is probably going to go down at roughly the same time, if not exactly the same time, because of how they use those 2 Plague Borers. Look at the difference here. It's going to be probably 5 seconds later for Echo because of that.
Yeah, that was a huge amount of damage onto that boss here. They also have the 3% extra trash now on the board because of it, but you also have to keep in mind that they don't have the extra explosions onto this trash now. But the difference in pulls might be that Echo is gathering up everything. Actually, no. Okay, so Echo is doing a smaller pull here at the start for Gingy to get the Wonder Grow stacks rolling, and then there we go. Now he's gathering up the rest of the trash. Perplex has already gathered everything though. Perplex definitely doing a better job at gathering everything quicker. But this is really crucial. If there's anything going wrong here, then that can be a huge time loss. We've seen Echo make mistakes here in the past, and we saw Fragments and Maris go down on this very pull.
No such problems for Wolf Disco here. Hasn't even dropped the stacks, even though his combust is already over. Same thing happening for Echo. Looks like it's even cleaner for them as everything dies instantly at the same time. However, Gingy has procced the Cauterize. He has had to use the Ice Block there. He will not go down, just barely. There is still some damage going on in the group. He's at 7% HP with Grievous ticking. Get him up, Zalia. Now also has to use the meta here while the Pride is out. But somehow Gingy and Wolf Disco have both managed to keep their stacks up, but Divine has now gone up for Perplexed, and Ryson has gone down as well.
No.
This is the worst case scenario with the Prideful now spawning there at full. It's at full HP, and I don't see any way other than this being a full team wipe for Perplexed with that tank death going on. That is the worst case scenario, and we have to go back to it. If he had the cheat death available from before, they might have been able to live through that pull. It just cascades and cascades the mistakes you make throughout the dungeon.
Yeah, this is exactly what we've been talking about. Not having this cheat death for this huge pull here was just so crucial for Perplex. Having Divine go down, even with the rest going off immediately by a Shine, it's just too hard for them to recover. Ryzen just getting aggro and following suit, going down right after Divine Field, and then there's no way they can survive through that Pride without having their healer here. Echo on the other side managed to do this exact same pull, and much cleaner, having that cheat death still available actually for now, not even proccing that for that last pull either, just doing such a good job at cleaning that up, that pull. So none of the mistakes they made in this dungeon previously happening again. They really learned from their mistakes last time in this dungeon and not have anything go wrong this time. So Echo clearly in the lead at this point because of those unfortunate mistakes by Perplexed.
Yeah, and I mean, it's going to be tough to get back into it now. They lost all of their damage buffs on the mage, which admittedly they were probably going to drop pretty soon anyways. They still have to get through this Prideful if they do choose to use it. I'm pretty sure they could skip by it by going to the left if they wanted to. They might have to pull a little extra trash if they didn't clear it out, though. But here is where Echo is going to catapult ahead. We know the strategy they use here. They skip the mini-boss completely, use their Night Elves, or Invis on the Mage, since he used his Night Elf earlier, to get past dropping aggro. And now they can use those Plague Borers if they did pull off. If they did pull it off properly, they did not. They're in combat. This is going to be a wipe from them. No, not a wipe. It looks like, yeah, just the 3 DPS going down. Little unfortunate, but I think they're far enough ahead to where this shouldn't matter. I mean, let's be honest. They were able to take down Obey Alliance with 4 deaths on the board. With 7 deaths from Perplexed, I think Echo is still doing A-okay, especially if they're able to pull off the strategy as well as we saw them earlier yesterday.
Yeah, I also believe this time loss they had here is actually less of a time loss than we saw them have last time around. Because the last time they had also 3 deaths in this dungeon, but it was on that very same pull where Perplex just had a full team wipe, and that cost them a lot more. So I do think that really shouldn't be that big of a deal for Echo here. Of course, Perplexed having those 7 deaths and having to do the Pride again, and look how much they're struggling again. Did manage to finish off the Pride, but because all of those cooldowns that they had available earlier are just not there again, and the Fungal Mancer stacks are not maybe as high as they were before, so just having some issues here and there. And Disc Priests are known to not be that great at healing out of Grievous range, so that's why we sometimes see them struggle a little bit whenever the Pride is up and whenever the damage dealers don't want to commit any of their offensive cooldowns, because of course they want to save it for afterwards. Divine going down again, actually. They don't have a Battle Rest available. Just mistakes over mistakes, unfortunately. Everything is just out of control for them because of all of this misallocation of cooldowns. All of the cooldowns that they usually would have available for these pulls are just not ready.
And again, for Echo, everything's going swimmingly for them. After that death skip problem, let's just call it a death skip, actually. That's all it was. They've done things perfectly on their side. They kill that front right platform first, so that when the boss spawns, he jumps to that platform, gives them 4 boss jumps to wait until they pull the boss. They then pull the rest of the trash, commit their cooldowns to making sure they kill everything. Once they proc the Prideful, they can tag the boss with those Plague Borers, get the Plague Borer cleave on the Pride and the boss, so that they push phase 1 for free, and then once they've pushed phase 1, they can commit all of their cooldowns on the boss with the Pride buff and completely obliterate the boss, not having to worry about either of those bombs that spawn. Let's see it in action here, and again, they're actually going to be using this second set of 2 Plague Borers if they're able to get them in. They were earlier yesterday. Let's see if they're able to get it again today.
Yeah, this is just a strategy that we've only seen Echo pull off perfectly. They already had the first 2 Plague Borers explode on the boss, and now they also get the second ones. I'm not completely sure if it went off because the boss was in the air. I'm not 100% sure.
No, they definitely didn't.
I think they actually might have missed them because the boss was jumping around and one person was a little bit far off. The explosion of the bomb is going to go through. This is why Celia is popping that disc bubble here and the pain sub because of the explosion that is going to be going off from the plague bomb. Fragment's actually going down. Did not have that AMC available and actually dies through that explosion damage. They do have a battle rest available, but might just save it and finish off the boss here, because if that second
looks like it.
A bomb goes off, then they might just full wipe. But it looks like they might be able... Yeah, there we go. So they are finishing off the boss. And Fragments... Did he just release?
I believe it's okay to release there, yeah. Once you kill the second
boss,
the release point actually gets put into the game, right? So that's fine. And of course, you know, the bombs, the boss jumping just far enough away from the bombs for it not to go on them is a little bit unfortunate, but you got the backup strats with the Disgrace Bubble plus a bunch of personals coming out of the group. It looks like only Fragments didn't have enough to live through that, but it was totally fine. They were able to get through the rest of the boss. You know, against a clean run from Perplexed, that might be an issue, but as we've been mentioning, Perplexed, the mental fatigue of playing all day, the physical fatigue of playing all day, it looks like they're just out of it at this point. They're just tired and not playing up to the standard that we're used to holding them to.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is really just not... But, I mean, to be completely fair, Echo has been making some mistakes here in this dungeon too, and if Perplexed had a clean run, they might have even be able to beat Echo's run here because of the mistakes that Echo is making. Unfortunately, Perplexed just made even bigger mistakes, and that is really... that's the most annoying thing, I would say, when you know that if you would have played cleanly, you would have won. Because, of course, if you know that, oh, even with our best strategy, we're still going to be losing to this, that's one story, right? But if you know that he could have won if he didn't make those mistakes, then that's going to be affecting them even more. But they need to keep their head in the game, because this is, of course, a best of 5. So even if they lose this Plaguefall here to Echo, they still have a chance to reverse sweep them if they stay calm and collected. So that's definitely what we want to see from Perplexed here, to just stay in the game after those mistakes that they've been making, and just get back into the game. Echo, though, on the other hand, they're sitting in the lead here pretty nicely, and they don't have to worry about anything at the moment. We do see Salia drop pretty low, though, as he was standing a little bit in the sanguine pools that just spawned. Did manage to heal himself back up, though.
I think that's something that we really haven't even had to mention at all so far in this dungeon, is Sanguine even being present at all, right? Like, the Sanguine management from both teams has been pretty much as perfect as it gets. But it's just the player mistakes happening for both teams that have just kind of made the mistakes. They've been so good at dealing with that Sanguine. But Echo now has dealt with that double pull. They're moving on to this Prideful. And I don't remember off the top of my head, do they use the Lust on Domina, or do they save it for the last boss when... Oh, I believe they save it for the last boss when they pull Pride in the Phase 1. Is that right? Yeah, so we know they won't be using Lust. Domina will take a little while for them to get through, but man, they only have 2 bosses and a little bit of trash before they're up 2-0 in the series and are threatening tournament point against Perplexed.
Yeah, it looks like everyone's dropping a little bit low on that 80% Pride, but did manage to finish it off using that Touch of Death here by Maris, which is a really nice cooldown to be able to use on these Prides as well. And now it looks like they're pulling Domina Venomblade on top of this Sniper that they had to see it in the corner. Sniper is usually pretty dangerous, so lots of damage going out onto the group and onto the tank as well. You can see now did proc his Last Resort now, so he doesn't have that available to him anymore in case he would need it. So that's something we have to keep an eye on. This boss, though, should not theoretically be a problem for these teams, but sometimes things can get unlucky with that stun that goes out. That's a pretty huge amount of damage as well. And of course, they also want to make sure that the Sniper, once it does die, doesn't drop the Sanguine full on Venomblade. But this boss is actually pretty easy to move for the tank, so that should also not be too big of an issue.
Yeah, it's no Fleshcraft assistant, right? It's not going to sit there and actually not move for 30 seconds. It's just bathing in the entire Sanguine, so not going to be an issue, even if it did die under the boss. Of course, they have plenty of tools to move it away in the group if they had to. So not going to be a thing for Echo at all as they get Dominant Venomblade now below 30% here, and they have a vice grip on this series and they're not letting go. These guys are just playing out of their minds, or, I mean, they might actually just be playing normal. This is probably how they always play. But, I mean, I feel like we've been complimenting Echo too much, but really, like, what else can you do when a team plays this well? They haven't dropped a single map the entire tournament, and they're still playing like this. Even when they probably know Perplexed has been making mistakes. Remember, we said this before, they can have the stream on their other monitor. There's like a 2 or so minute delay on it, but by now they would know that the other team is making a lot of mistakes, and they still are playing this well, this perfectly, not giving any chances for Perplexed to get back into it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Sometimes we might be complimenting them too much, but at this point, they just deserve it, right? Like, there's no other way to talk about them. They've been performing just so incredibly well, so clean, not dropping a single dungeon until now. And even now in the grand final, looks like they are very far in the lead here in the second game as well. So, yeah, I mean, they really deserve all the praise that they get. There's no doubt in that. As they're now in that last boss area, they still have that Bloodlust available for the last boss, as we've mentioned before. We've already seen them do this strategy once in this dungeon, where they spawn the Pride, the 100% Pride, and they're just pulling it straight on top of the boss, using that Bloodlust and the I wanted to say the Ashen Hollow, but of course they don't have a Paladin, so they might be using some other offensive cooldowns to be able to deal with the Pride and the boss. We'll see what happens, as Celia is using the Pains up here on now, because he doesn't have the Last Resort left anymore, right? So it's just using those defensive cooldowns to be able to live through that last difficult part for the tank, because the boss shouldn't be as big of a deal for now. So using that Pains up here is a really good play, so you can just tank the Devoted for a little while longer.
Right. I mean, just making sure there's no shot of them getting, losing this dungeon, making sure they're losing the damage. I mean, look at the melee swings going out on now right now. Just 1 second he's 80% HP, then he just gets popped down to 20%. No problem whatsoever. It looks like he still does have the trinket available, the Splintered Heart. So, worst case scenario, he has that cheat death available if he really needs it, but that's more of like a pseudo cheat death, right? It's not a full on here's a big cooldown for you almost dying. But here we go. Echo now engaging Margrave Stradama, the final boss of Plaguefall here. Looks like they just got clipped by one of those prideful lines there, but with the cooldowns popped, with the lust available, it shouldn't be too much of an issue for them. Zaylia should be able to heal through that. You can see the disc bubble coming down just to make sure they don't have any issues with this infectious rain here. The prideful is down, the damage buff is out. They're going to be phasing the boss here relatively soon, and this is probably the only full infectious rain they're going to have to heal through for the entire fight, because once we get to this first phase with that prideful cleave, they should be able to just completely blast the next two phases.
Yeah, definitely. This can still be a little bit difficult for Zaylia to heal, but he looks totally fine now as he managed to get into that intermission phase. Also managed to get that pride, so he's regenning that mana, as he was struggling a little bit with mana before the pride went down, but now there's no problem whatsoever, of course, with that buff. Unfortunately, you have to waste quite a bit of the duration of the pride buff, because in this intermission phase, you can't speed up the intermission phase, so the pride is just ticking down, but it's holding until phase 2. You can see the buff is still up on the group, so it goes into this combustion and into the offensive cooldowns by the damage dealers, so they should be able to get through this second phase pretty fast as well. As Syra mentioned, shouldn't be getting that any rains at all, actually, not even one tick of the rain.
No
That's how
shot.
quick they dealt with the second phase.
No chance whatsoever, not a single tick of infectious rain. Zaylia is sitting there thanking his teammates for making him look good, making him not have to do any healing. Did Miras just get, was that a melee or was that getting hit by a tentacle slam? He just gets...
I think it was a melee,
that,
right?
Miras?
I think it was, I don't think, I think he would die, or? I think they one-shot, but I'm not 100% sure.
Trying to channel the spirit of the buck there over on the side of Miras, but not going to go down, not going to give any shot for Perplexed to get back into it. Margrave now down below 20% HP, and it's not going to be an issue. Even with the Infectious Rain coming out, they have the cooldowns, they have the Ice Block to get rid of the debuff. Margrave Stradama will be going down for Echo here, and they will be taking this series over Perplexed 2-0. Oh, one more match, sorry.
Thankfully.
Just taking an advantage of the We're 2-3 game series, man.
Oh, Zyro.
Hey, Zyro, we're in a 3-game series
We're the best
for
of
the
5,
grand
we're the best of
finals. Best of 5. So congratulations to Echo for taking the second game of the 5 potential games in this series. And while not as clean as we had seen previously, you know, we just couldn't really, like, the side of Perplexed couldn't just quite get out of the muck of Plaguefall here, Tettles.
Ugh, I mean, again, it's like the problem of Sanguine Plaguefall, where if your pack lives just a little bit too long, I mean, I have a replay package and we'll talk about it, but like if your pack just lives a little bit too long, you have some Sanguine healing, then your tank is kiting or tanking a pack approximately 20 seconds longer than intended, and then he runs out of cooldowns, and then it's just like one thing cascades into another, and then you have like a full wipe. And once you have a full wipe in Plaguefall, you have to... The run back timing in this dungeon is a bit ridiculous at times, and so then you have to run back 90 seconds. There's absolutely zero recovery, and once Perplexed wiped, it was basically over, assuming that Echo didn't have like an equally catastrophic wipe.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that as well. You know, I mean, those wipes were just rough to watch.
Exactly, and I mean, I only have the one that like really started it all, because I think that one's like the most important, because then it starts misaligning your cooldowns. You have stuff like that can be just as important as that. Wolf Disco gets immediately knocked on his shifting power cast, so then the pack is starting to lose damage. Then Sanguine Healing comes through, and the Pride starts to spawn a little bit early. Divine, while tanking this pack, there's casts starting to go off. People have to soak the Metamorphosis. Divine dies because he's run out of cooldowns, because the pack healed too much to Sanguine. And it's just like one thing leads to another. Your tank dies.
What did he get knocked by? What was that?
I don't know.
I noticed that too. I don't know what the knock was either. I noticed it happened, but it canceled his shifting power on the first tick, so a lot of their damage was gone there. It was
exactly.
Like worst case scenario.
Spinebreaker?
Then
I feel
he
like
would have gotten
Spinebreaker would have
damage
one-shot
too,
him.
right?
Yeah, it would have one-shot him.
So-
Yeah,
He
he may have
would have
caught
just
it.
knocked him.
He may have caught it
Okay.
though.
It was very weird. Really unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, like, the barrels will detonate and everything like that, but they don't have any sort of knockback type of mechanic to them. So, yeah, I'm kind of curious to see that again
Maybe
at some
someone
point.
threw a
Maybe look at
snowball?
what it was.
It's
Yeah.
Plague Rock and Spinebreakers it's Plague Rocks and Spinebreakers are the only mobs I think in that area that have knockbacks.
Yeah.
If
But
you
they
got
also deal, like,
Snowball-
a crazy amount of damage.
The spirit of
never
fired
know.
up in Shaq just throwing snowballs at the players, causing them to get
I was
interrupted on
going to
their
say
cast.
the observers were throwing snowballs at him or something like that. But with that victory, we are going to be going into a game number 3 here, Nagura, and we're going to be setting our sights on Mists.
Yeah, I'm excited for the Mist. I mean, Mist is a dungeon where we haven't seen any like catastrophic wipes happen, but we've seen some very like min-maxing, especially in that maze part. We've seen teams have the same speed up until the maze, and then the team that has these tiny little tricks to be able to pull the prides into the next area, pull some trash through the walls with their pets, and min-maxing that bolstering affix as well. And that's going to be the crucial part here. We want to see a perfect bolstering management, which can be difficult. Even in Mists, where most of the ads have equal HP, you still want to make sure that you have that even damage. And one more thing to note as well, that we might see a difference in comp here, where we see the Elemental Shaman from Perplexed, but did we see the DK from Echo, or did they also have the Elemental Shaman? I'm not actually sure if we saw a difference here, but either way, I'm excited to see Elemental Shaman here again.
Yeah, they did bring the Shaman. Yep, Echo did end up bringing the Elemental Shaman to the table when they played it in the first round, and then Perplexed did the same thing. Yeah, so ideally should be the same compositions that we're going to be looking for here. And, you know, it's been all about boss pushes, all about, you know, this triple range meta as well, titles in Mists.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of pretty large time saves that you can obtain over the other team. We've seen some teams be able to get that Mist Caller one-phase burn. That's absolutely massive. Making sure that Ingram Malok dies. If you have like good Convoke RNG, you can kill Ingram Malok somewhere in the range of like 20 seconds ahead of the other team. It just kind of depends on if you actually have to hit it outside of the damage amp or not. That's also a pretty big deal. On top of that is just general routing through Mist of Tirna Scithe, making sure that you're minimizing how much your tank has to kite from Necrotic, how well you're able to kill the mobs and facilitate bolstering. And like setting up the maze pulls by themselves can be really rough because the mobs that are in the maze, like the defenders, have like 25% more HP than everything else. So making sure they have even cleave and like great bolstering management is super important here.
Yeah, especially because it's going to be taking time to be able to grab any of the other mobs from the maze, because they've been using like different pets, and they've been having like the boomkins jumping over the wall as well as Zyro to make sure they're able to grab everything in together. Treants, yeah.
Yeah, that's actually really funny. So, like, whenever you talk to the boomkins about doing it, I remember asking the first time I saw it, do you use slow fall or levitate to get through that? And I think it was Lip who said, if I ever get a slow fall or levitate, I just leave the dungeon. Because how would you ever just not know how to leap and flap? But we've seen some people use it. So, I mean, yeah, it's pretty crazy the tech that's been used, because this was one of the concerns that I had when I first saw this dungeon. And I think a lot of people had this back when we first played it in beta is, man, this is just a very single line where you can only pull so much at a time, but the teams have found a way to make it really interesting by pulling trash through the walls somehow.
Yeah. They've every single time like another barrier gets in the way of trying to find ways to pull mobs throughout walls and everything, players just will find some way to get around it. Echo is up 2 right now. Perplexed facing elimination in this round as our grand finals are going to game number 3. Here we go into Mist of Tirna Scithe.
All right, so everything on the line here for Perplexed. They need to win this game if they want to stay in this series. Otherwise, Echo is going to be taking the whole thing, as both of them are doing the same pull here right away to the left side. Keep in mind, this is bolstering, so you want to make sure that you have even damage, because a lot of these mobs have more HP than the rest. Specifically, the Soul Cleavers have a lot of HP, and the Villagers, of course, as well. But you can see pretty nice even damage for Perplexed. Echo, not so much. Some of those Soul Cleavers still have quite a lot of HP, and this is why now has to kite. So Perplexed, a little bit of an edge already after that first pull.
Yeah, it looks like, it was pretty much just the kiting, which is further amplified with this comp, right? The more you can just stand still and plant, the more you can keep the mobs inside that flame patch, that earthquake. Keep it nice and stacked so that you can do all of that AoE damage and not have to accidentally move it out of there and hear your DPS whine about it. So just making sure you can do that is really important. But of course, the affixes make it so difficult for the tanks to actually pull that off, right? The Necrotic, the bolstering, it's such a pain. The bolstering alone is why we're seeing them pull this in this specific way. You whittle down the Bowbreakers a little bit, then you can pull them into the 4-pack so that you don't end up, giga bolstering the 2 Bowbreakers later on. Of course, you have to wait for those 2 Thrashes. That's going to be a little bit dangerous, but I think both teams should be able to heal through it just fine. They've got the perfect tool for that in the Ellie Shaman with the Ancestral Guidance.
Yeah, definitely have that. And they also have the trees, of course, to make sure that the mobs are being taunted away. It's actually really nice for the tanks to have this lineup here, right, with Necrotic. It's nice to have the Elemental Shaman with the Earth Elemental that can taunt, and they also have the trees. So when do these tanks actually have to tank the mobs at all? As you can see, Divine is kiting a little bit as they are really highly bolstered at this point. So Echo, even though they were a little bit behind on the first pull, they made up this time now and spawned that Pride a little bit earlier.
I mean, both teams actually, I was talking about the Ancestral Guidance. Both teams healed that pull without it. Neither of the Shamans popped it. So, double Furious Thrash, no big deal for them whatsoever. But here is where a big difference could be opened up from both teams here. Once this Pride goes down, we're going to be engaging Ingram Malik, and we'll have to keep an eye on the damage meters for either of the Moonkins. If they're able to get that full moon, that could make or break a difference here. It could save them as much as 20 seconds if they're able to get the one phase of the boss here, so keep an eye on that. Look for the giant full moon coming out of the sky.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge deal, as both of them actually kill that Pride at the exact same second. They're so close at this point of the dungeon. One more thing is to note as well is the faster they push Droman here, the more of the Pride they're still going to have up for Ingra. So definitely want to make sure they have enough damage to push Droman at this point. You can see the Bloodlust was popped a little bit earlier for Perplexed. Echo now also has that Bloodlust up, and you can see the Droman is dropping pretty equally for both of those teams. Now the Moonkins are preparing for that burst damage, and there we go. Both of the Dromans are down for both of the teams, and now look out for any full moon! A Shine actually getting a full moon on their side. Huge burst damage, as you can see. Fragments did not get a full moon here, but it looks like they still have a lot of damage, but Perplexed gonna be finishing off the boss slightly quicker because of winning that RNG lottery here with that full moon.
I mean, look at this difference. Perplexed just gets to go through right away. Keep an eye on the timer here. How long is it going to be before Echo gets through? Like I said, 10-second time difference here that Perplexed has gotten for themselves purely based off of the RNG of Convoke the Spirits. You gotta love it, or you gotta hate it as a Moonkin player. I mean, what can you do, right? That's the game we play. That is World of Warcraft. But both teams now still very close together. 10 seconds in the grand scheme of things can be made up for with better play throughout the rest of the dungeon, especially with these nasty affixes we got here. Bolstering Necrotic, even if it's on Tyrannicals, can still be a big headache for the teams to get through.
Yeah, and one thing to note is that I think the more important full moon would actually be the full moon on Mistcaller. If you get that full moon on the 10% push, if they decide to go for it, then that one is actually going to save you more time than the full moon on Ingra here. So if Fragnance is going to get the full moon later, if they go for that push to try and skip that last guessing game, then that would be huge. But at this point, Perplexed is in the lead because they dealt with that boss a little bit quicker, and it also looked like they dealt with the trash slightly faster, just dealing with bolstering a little bit better, and they're just blasting through this maze at the moment, just finishing off that last, and look how perfect everything is dying like at the exact same time. They are just speeding through this maze at the moment.
Yep, definitely. I mean, they're kind of holding that lead, if not barely opening it up a little more. It's going to be really difficult for them to open up the lead here because what we were talking about, right? There's very specific pulls that you do. This is on rails. There's very little room for teams to make those on-the-fly changes and pull extra trash in. The cooldown changes are going to be what we're looking at here, and it looks like both teams are essentially using the cooldowns at the same time, even down to the timers. Look at the combustion cooldown for both mages right now. Both of them coming up within 30 to 35 seconds, almost on the exact same timers here. Both players using cooldowns at almost the exact same time. Little bit of a difference here. Swag using the Storm Ellie at the end of this pull so that he can keep some stacks rolling into the next mini-boss, which I believe will be coming up next. Actually, no, just another 4-pack. And they'll be cleaving that down with the Prideful. Actually, I kind of like the usage of it there because it means you'll have some stacks of those increased cast speed for your Chain Lightnings and Lightning Bolts going into this pack, so we might do a little bit more burst damage than what we're seeing from Mirez.
Yeah, I actually think what happened there was Echo actually made up some time now, because instead of trying to kill everything at the exact same time, they killed the amount of mobs that they need to spawn the Pride first. So even though they bolstered some mobs a little bit earlier, they spawned the Pride earlier. And then they just cleaved down the bolstered mobs that were already on low HP. So I think I do like the strategy there, just going for a little bit of a bolster, but it wasn't too bad because it makes you spawn the Pride earlier. We do see both of the Convokes and Celestial Alignments being used here by the Moonkins for this single target mob, but Perplexed just a little bit quicker as they already dealt with the Pride faster than Echo did.
Man, Jimmy must be losing his mind right now. I don't think he got a moon on that Convoke either, and that's just really, really, really unlucky, especially on the single target there. You really want to blast out as much damage as possible, because the Ashai's done about 200k more damage on this pack alone because of that. Huge, huge difference coming out, just Moonkin diff for sure. But look at the damage from the other classes. Mira is able to pump out a lot more damage there than Swagshock on the Ellie Shamans, and they've actually caught up on their lead despite having no moon from the Moonkin. I mean, this is now back to neck and neck here. These teams are just flip-flopping back and forth.
Yeah, and it's just a few seconds here and there, right? None of these teams have been in the lead for a huge amount of time. They just go back and forth a few seconds. This is just so close. Both of these teams playing so perfectly so far. 0 mistakes, and this is what I really want to see by Perplexed, right? Perplexed recovering from those previous mistakes in Plaguefall and playing so cleanly. Of course, playing cleanly might not be enough to win against Echo, but so far it's looking good for them as they are finishing off this Pride a little bit later than Echo, but Echo still has the mob. Yeah, so yeah, Echo just ahead again for just like 2 seconds, I would say, 2 to 3 seconds.
Well, we know how this is going to go here. With both teams pulling Mistcaller at the same time, the next event to look forward to for sure is whether or not these teams are going to be able to pull off that 10-0 burn here. And what's that going to rely on once again? It's going to rely on the RNG of the Celestial Alignment plus the Convoke the Spirits. Can you get the moon off? Can you get those Star Surge crits? Can you make sure the boss gets bursted down? These teams both have a pretty good success rate with it, but we've seen what happens if you don't get it down earlier on in the tournament. Some of our Chinese teams had that happen to them, and it ended up costing them the game because of it. So you really have to make sure you get the exact right spell queuing from the boss. Make sure the ad spawns, let it despawn, and then you push the boss and burn. And as long as these teams can pull that off cleanly, I think they should be able to get it moon or no moon.
Yeah. Also, the question if both of those teams actually are going for it, because we've seen some teams try and go for it, and others just completely saved their Celestial Alignment and used it for the trash afterwards. But as you can see at the timer right now, the Celestial Alignment is getting ready pretty much exactly at the moment where you would need it to push that 10% guessing game. So it just lines up perfectly, and that's why most teams just decide to try and go for it. But if you decide to just not go for it and then the other team doesn't make it, then you have an advantage because you held on to your cooldown. So we're gonna have to keep an eye on those cooldowns, and now is the time. Now is gonna be the time where they need to time it perfectly. Preferably they wanna have a dodgeball cast go off right before they hit 10%, because then the boss will finish the dodgeball cast and then just start the guessing game cast afterwards. So you gain a couple extra seconds to be able to push the boss before the cast goes through. If you get a Vulpin spawn, that cast is a little bit quicker compared to the dodgeball, but still doable.
Right, and you can see the Vulpin did just go down for both parties here. Patty Cake coming out. There's the dodgeball cast. There's the Convoke. Here goes the damage, but the boss is a little bit high. Can they get through it? The guessing game cast is going off. They were not able to get through it. Mistcaller at 2%. They have to kill the clone. Let's keep an eye on Perplexed. And they are able to get through. No! 1% for them. Neither team gets the insta-phase, and it looks like the advantage is going to be back on Echo's side as they get that clone down first. Man, neither of the teams able to get through the extra phase there. That's really unfortunate and so surprising to see at the end of our tournament here.
Yeah, and neither of the teams getting a full moon again. Fragrance using his CA 3 times, not getting a single full moon. Pretty unlucky, unfortunately. We do see Perplexed, though, taking this other routing here. So we'll see who actually reaches the area first. Because, yeah, it looks like Perplexed actually slightly faster because they went around through the maze while Echo was waiting for the RP to go through. So Perplex gathering up this pool a little bit quicker because of their adaptation here in how they approach this pool.
And I mean, this is crazy. Perplex has pulled out all the stops here. They pulled out, I mean, that skip is maybe a 5-second time save. If they're able to take this dungeon out, it's going to be because of small things like that and a little bit tiny better usage of cooldowns like we saw with the Storm Elemental earlier from Swag. But you got to keep an eye on the tanks here. On this Necrotic pull, that's going to be stacking a lot. They have a lot of tools to reset it, but it looks like Divine Field might be out of them just yet. But the Trash Pack is now going down for them. But look at Echo. They have caught up, even though they were slower on the travel time. The Pride has spawned at the same time for them. The trash percentage is roughly the same. It is exactly the same, actually. And they are both on the Prideful at the same time here, at the exact same percentage here. This is as close as it gets to Naguro.
This is so incredibly close. I mean, they finished off this, or they spawned the Pride at the same time, and look at the HP of the Pride too. They're so unbelievably close and even throughout this whole dungeon. It's crazy to see just how exactly the same these teams are and how perfectly both of them are executing this dungeon. Looks like Echo caught up a little bit on single target damage now though. They are finishing this Pride earlier, even though they reached this pull later. So somehow Echo dealt a little bit more single target damage to deal with this, and now they're gathering up this pull, this last trash pull they have to do before they get to the boss. Looks like Perplexed is doing the exact same thing. They're not going to be getting 100% here because of course they don't want to be spawning that last Pride. They are skipping that at the very end.
Yeah, and I mean, Echo somehow, some way have gotten up. Gotta keep an eye on Perplexed here. Divine Field at 40 stacks. He doesn't have the Carrion Potion available. He used it last pull to reset his stacks here. He might be able to get a reset here, and the stacks do go away. Any chance of dying there has gone away, but because he had to kite and couldn't do max DPS there, Echo has pulled even further ahead now, engaging Tredova more around 10 seconds before Perplexed here, and this is going to be a full single target battle for everyone. The moon finally coming out for Fragments on the side of Echo here, getting that extra single target damage. The Bloodlust has not yet been popped though. They're saving that for the Wings Ashen Hollow for Xaylia, and it's going to be tough for Perplexed to get back in, but they have already popped their cooldowns. They are pulling ahead because of the cooldown usage. Echo is going to have to be able to catch up somehow, some way later on if they want to take this series right away.
They're holding on to their Bloodlust. I think that might be... are they holding it for Xaylia's Ashen Hollow, maybe?
They have to be.
If that is the case, I think they might actually be able to catch up because the Bloodlust on the Ashen is so huge. So if that's going to be the difference here, then they might be able to catch up on the damage that they're behind at this point. You can see the Bloodlust now being popped. The wings are being popped by Xaylia as well. And now you can see Xaylia just rising that damage compared to Ryzen on the other hand, who already had the Ashen being popped at the start. This is so incredibly close. Both of the teams are in 0 deaths, so no timer difference here whatsoever. And you can see how the boss is dropping for both of the teams. Looks like Perplexed is slightly ahead, but now Echo is catching up because of that Ashen that has been popped a little bit later for Xaylia.
The later Ashen Hollow has now pulled Echo into the lead. They have now taken a 5% health advantage on the boss, and we have to keep an eye on how well both these teams are going to deal with those last 2 trash percentage. They have to kill 3 of those worms from the trash pack on the other side of the boss here, and Echo is still increasing their lead here. They are now 7% ahead of the boss, and man, you just have to give it up for Echo here. If there are no deaths, they're going to be taking this series and this tournament without dropping in a single map. Just an incredible performance from Echo once again. I mean, there are very few things that are completely certain in life, but I believe 3 of them are death taxes and Echo winning the MDI. This is incredible from them. All it's going to take is those larvae going down and Tredova dropping to 0%, and there it is. Echo has taken the first season of the 2021 MDI Grand Finals.
They said they were confident on the first 3. They said they didn't want it to go to 3 games, and they made that happen here. Echo with the 3-0 sweep, completely undefeated and unmatched here in Season 1 of the Mythic Dungeon International. Echo is going to be taking home the lion's share of that $300,000 prize pool on this one. They are our Season 1 champions here of the Shadowlands titles.
Huge congratulations to them. They have absolutely earned it. They have looked phenomenal the whole entire season, and look at the